Hi everyone, I'm Dinuth. Thank you so much for tuning into my channel. Today we are going to talk about how to get through Certified Kubernetes Administrator CKA exam or Certified Kubernetes Application Developer CKAD certifications with flying colors. If you don't know me, I am Dinuth. I'm a senior cloud architect, professionally certified in Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Platform, Azure, and then I have many more certifications in security as well. Recently, I sat for these two exams, CKA and CKAD. I got through CKA with 94% and CKAD with 99%. So I thought of making a video and then share my experience and guide you to get through these certifications with flying colors. So let's get the video started. Tip number one. Before starting any of the preparation, just go into Cloud Native Company Foundation's website, and in that website you will be able to find out what are the different domains and then what are the different weightages for CKA, and then you can do the same for CKAD as well. When you go into the curriculum overview, you will be redirected into their GitHub page. You can find out CKA and then CKAD curriculum there. In CKA curriculum, there are different sections that you will be tested, your skills, abilities, and the knowledge. 25% will be allocated into the cluster architectures, installation, and the configurations, and 15% for the workloads and scheduling, and 20% for the services and networking, 10% for the storage, and 30% for the troubleshooting. This is about the CKA, and if you are sitting for the CKAD, the curriculum will be a little bit different, but there will be a big overlap, and 13% for the core concepts, 18% for the configurations, multi-container ports, there will be 10%, 18% for the observability, 20% for the pod design, 13% for the services and networking, 8% for the state and persistence. Just go through all the sub bullet points as well and find out if you're already using Kubernetes, identify what are the gaps in your knowledge in these different sections. That will be your first tip. Tip number two is identify a good preparation course that will be covering all of this curriculum or else the missing knowledge areas that will be covered in these two exams. For that, I have used Udemy. You can find out Certified Kubernetes Administrator CKA with practice test course from Mumshab Manambat. In this course, he has kind of gone through all the course materials covering introduction, core concepts, and scheduling, login, monitoring, application lifecycle management, cluster maintenance, security, storage, networking, and then many different sections which is included in the curriculum. By going through this course, you will be kind of almost ready in terms of the knowledge. If you're preparing for the CKAD, you can do the same. Just search for CKAD and then you can find out the CKAD with test course materials from the same person, Mumshab Manambat. If you are going to do both of these certifications, there will be a big overlap. If you kind of complete CKA and then with a little effort, you will be able to get to CKAD as well. So pick a good course materials, and then if you have already purchased this, just compare it with the curriculum and check the coverage, whether that is having all the details which is required for the certificate. And then keep in mind that not only the coverage of these topics, consider the depth which is needed in all of these topics, because the coverage and depth both are matters when you're going to answer the questions in the exam. Tip number 3 is what is the best approach to cover these course materials. So if you look at the length of these two video materials, CKA course has around 18 hours of video, CKAD will have around 9.5 hours of video. But the thing is, does that mean you can cover all of these video materials in a day or two? it's not possible. You cannot do it in that way. When you're watching this video, if you try to do it in a way like you watch Netflix, you will not grab all of that details included in these course materials, and you will not be able to apply this knowledge in the exam. So take your time, and then when you're watching the videos, try to understand what the instructor is trying to convey in that particular video. There are different sections. He will explain what are the concepts, and then how can you apply those concepts, how do you execute it, what are different commands, configurations that you have to do, and when it comes to troubleshooting, what are the different troubleshooting steps that you need to go through, what are the different problems that may come across. You need to understand all of these, what he is explaining, and while he is explaining, try to execute these by connecting into a Kubernetes cluster. The best thing is, when it comes to these two course materials from Mumshab Manambat, you will get access into Code Cloud, and in Code Cloud, you will get access into some existing Kubernetes clusters. You will be able to execute these commands on the fly, and then you will get the real experience like you are having it in the exam. So watch the videos, grab the content, and then execute it live in the Kubernetes clusters. So in that case, you will be practicing these in the same time, and you need to do one more additional step, that is you need to take some short notes, because if you take around 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks to cover all of these video materials, when you watch the last video, you might forget what is discussed in the very first videos. So when you're watching this video, try to take some short notes, grab what are the most important points. If there are some configurations and then commands that needs to be executed, just put it in a Word document or else into a notepad, such that you can revisit again and again and prepare yourself for the final exam. So don't forget to take some short notes. And the other thing is, don't try to piggyback on someone else's short notes. If I try to take a short note and then I have many years of experience in Kubernetes, my short notes will be very tiny. But if you are new to Kubernetes, you might have to grab and then put lot of things, lot of concepts into your short note itself. So in that case, rather than piggybacking with someone else's short notes, if you try to do the short notes in your own. That's the tip number 3. So let's move into tip number 4. Tip number 4 is Kubernetes documentation. Both CKA and CKAD exams are practical exams. So that means you will be given task, and then you need to execute these tasks during the exam, and end of the exam, these tasks will be evaluated and you will get the score. The good thing is, while you are having the exam, there are some allowed websites that you can navigate through. You can open the Kubernetes documentation or else the GitHub pages, and then find out anything if you missed, and then you can simply search it and then find out the answers. But do not try to rely on that a lot, because the time is very limited, and if you try to spend a lot of time reading the documentations while you are having the exam, you will be out of time. Let me take an example. So during the exam, if you are asked to create a persistent volume and create a persistent volume claim and then mount it into a pod, in that case, you come here into the documentation and search for persistent volume, and the first result that you are getting is this particular documentation. You go there and then try to find out, how can I create a volume. I just go through it. I cannot find that details correctly. Can I use this to create a volume? Let's say I need to create a host path volume. I don't have the details here. So what is the best way not to stuck, not to spend a lot of time in the documentation while you are having the exam? The best thing is, before the exam, try to find out these different use cases. For this particular scenario, the best documentation page is this 4th one, configure a pod to use a persistent volume for storage. If you go there, you can find out everything related to your question, creating a persistent volume claim, and then creating a pod by mounting it. Right? I'm just giving an example. So during the exam, if you try to find out what is the correct page to find out these details, that means you will be wasting a lot of times. So what you can do is, while you are watching these video materials, try to find out the best pages and then add it into your bookmark bar. So in that case, during the exam, if you get a question on persistent volumes, you have the pages already bookmarked. Just try to open it and then you will be ready, and then you will be saving a lot of time there. That is my tip on Kubernetes documentation. Try to find out the best pages and then try to identify the gaps in the video materials, and then if there are some new things, add it into your short notes, and then additionally you need to bookmark these pages such that you can use these bookmarks easily to open the correct pages when you get a question during the exam. Tip number 5, practice, practice and practice. As these CKA and CKAD exams are practical exams, you need to have a better practice on getting the task done quickly as possible. So when you go through this documentation as well as the study materials, you will find out a lot of commands that you need to follow to get these tasks done. So try to find out what is the fastest way to get this done. So if you're asked to create a deployment and then expose it as a service, you can use kubectl create deployment commands and then expose it as a service. There are some limitations. In that case, you may have to use kubectl create service commands and then create it. Additionally, you might have an option to go into the Kubernetes documentation and then copy the YAML files, YAML definitions, and then put it into a VI document and then run the kubectl create commands as well. So if you try to compare these commands, try to find out what are the limitations in it, and then what is the best way, what is the easiest way, what is the fastest way to execute these tasks, and also try to remember these commands in nature. And then the best thing is, when you are kind of purchasing these two course materials, you will get access into Code Cloud based on the course that you are using, CKA or CKAD. There will be a lot of practice tests available. Go through the core concepts, scheduling, and then different sections. Then you will be able to kind of select that particular section, and you will get access into a actual Kubernetes cluster, and then where you can execute these commands, try out there. So having the experience, having the better practice to get these tasks done is a key to get through this exam. Otherwise, these 2 hours will fly quickly, and then you will not be able to complete all of these tasks unless you have a better practice. And then try to go into the Kubernetes documentation, search for kubectl commands. Then you will be able to find out all the commands in kubectl command reference, and all the commands like kubectl create. These are the different create commands that you can execute. Let's say if you want to create a deployment, this is the command definitions that you need to follow. What are the different attributes that it is accepting? All of those details you can find it there with some examples, and try to read, okay, what are the supported resource types? Cluster roles, cluster role bindings, config maps, cron jobs, deployments. There are many types. And then try to remember the syntaxes, and then even during the exam, if you forget something, what you can do is you can simply type kubectl create deployment -help, and then you can find out that in the console itself, or else you can simply search it in the documentation and then find out. Try to execute these commands and then get yourself familiarized with these different concepts, different configurations, and then different commands. That will be helpful to get the task quickly as possible when it is appeared as an exam question while you are taking the exam. Tip number 6 is you need to know basic Linux commands, pwd, cd, and then how to edit a file, and then how to save a file, how to find out number of lines in a particular output using NL commands, how to grep a specific text from a console output. Like that way, try to find out these basic Linux commands if you are not a Linux or Mac user. That will save a lot of time while you are having the exam. The next tip is you need to master the console-based editors. When you want to edit these different configurations, you may have to use a Vim or Nano kind of an editor. You can install your own editor as well, but it's better to rely on one of the Vim or Nano editors during the exam, because sometimes you may have to SSH into different servers and then try to open some configurations, edit it, change it. So in that case, installing these custom editors in all of these servers will take some time. So familiarize with Vim or Nano, those editors will be available. Find out some different shortcuts, how to edit a file, how to save a file, when it is saved, if there are some errors happening, if you cannot override the configurations, how do you kind of go through it, and then how to move the cursor into the first position of the line or else last position of the line, how to copy some text. That will save some time while you are taking the exam. If you have not yet subscribed into my channel, please do hit on the subscribe button as well as the bell sign to get notified when I upload any video. And let's move it into exam tip number 1. Before the exam, you need to go through the candidate handbook and try to find out what are the different system requirements that you should have, what are the technical information that you should be familiarized with before starting your exam. Under the candidate requirements, you can find out what are the different system requirements that you need to have. Right, so you need to make sure you have the updated browser version, you need to use Chrome, and then you need to have reliable internet access, and you need to have a microphone and the webcam in the computer that you are going to take the exam. And then there are different environment requirements as well, because you are taking this exam from your home itself by connecting to the system online, and then you need to make sure there are no electronic devices or else paper, pens, and everything. You need to remove it from the desk, and then there should be proper lighting, and then you cannot take this exam from a public place. It needs to be a private space. You can read out all of these details. Before taking the exam, you need to read the important instructions. Additionally, you need to have 2 identity verification documents. There are some examples given. In the technical details, it has mentioned whenever you want the kind of root permissions, how to get that, sudo -i, and then when you want to copy paste the content, what are the things that you need to do. If you are using a Mac, command C and command V will work for copy paste, and then if you are using Windows, the keys will be a little bit different. So before the exam, don't forget to read these important instructions. Other thing is during the CKA and CKAD, there are multiple clusters you need to connect, and you can see these different clusters, those details as well given in the important instructions. Exam tip number 2 is, before taking the exam on the exam day, try to go through your short notes at least once. If you have forgotten something, and then by going through these short notes on the exam day itself, that will recall some of these memories that may save a few points in the exam. So don't forget to go through the short notes on the exam day itself. And then if there are some tough topics that you are not much familiarized with, and then you can go through those specific videos from the preparation courses that you have purchased. Tip number 3 is simple: eat, drink, and be fresh. If you didn't had a proper sleep last night, or else you are coming out from a very tough office meeting and then directly going into exam, I don't recommend that. Have a proper meal and then drink something, and then make sure you are fresh, you are energized before taking the exam. Next tip is, if you are scheduled the exam to 4 o'clock, the joining link will get enabled 15 minutes before. So be prepared, and then as soon as the link is enabled, try to join into the meeting, because there are some prerequisites that the instructor will be checking. Instructor will be chatting with you, and then he will ask you to show your identity card and then verify your identity. He will ask you to show your room, and also he might ask to remove some stuff from that room, and then it might take some time. And also he will check what are the processes running in your laptop. Open the kind of task manager and then close all the unnecessary applications, and then only Chrome browser can be up and running while you are taking the exam. So as these steps take time, so make sure you join the exam 15 minutes before. And the next tip is, be familiarized with the exam environment. So you can find out these details in the documentation itself. This is how the environment would look like. On the left hand side you can see the questions, and on the right hand side you can see the console where you can type all of these kubectl commands. You can SSH into these environments, and then you can perform all of these tasks. And then on the left hand side, these questions, you can move it next or back using these two buttons, and then you can simply go into a specific question with the drop down, and you will see what are the tasks that you need to execute in the question. If it is asking to create a pod, and then if it give you a, let's say, pod name, this pod name you can simply copy it by clicking on the pod name itself, and then there are some sections highlighted with a different color. Those sections, when you simply click on it, and then that will get copied into your clipboard, and you can simply paste it. If you want to come back into this question and then review it later because you didn't complete this question correctly, so in that case you can flag those questions with the flag mark, and in that case in the drop down you can see a flag sign will appear, such that in the review part you can directly go it into the flag questions and complete those questions. As soon as you get access into the Kubernetes environment for the exam, you need to set up some aliases that will save a lot of time, because by default in that Kubernetes environment, kubectl auto completion for the commands will not work. What you can do is you can simply search for kubectl cheat sheet and then get this URL. You can simply run this particular command that will add the auto completions into all the kubectl commands. You can run these two commands as well. In that case, instead of using this kubectl longer word, you can use k instead of kubectl. So that will save some time, because during this entire 2 hours you will be typing kubectl again and again and again, right? You can save some effort by putting these aliases. And then additionally, by using the same syntax, you can add few more additional aliases as well. One of the alias that I set is KDP. During the exam you will be creating a lot of pods, and then sometimes if the configuration is wrong, you may have to delete these pods. So when you execute the kubectl delete pod and the pod name, what will happen is, to delete the pod it will take few seconds. To remove the grace period, you need to put additional flags like --force and space -- grace period equals 0. So in that case, every time when you want to delete the pods, if you're going to type all of these kubectl delete pods --force -- grace period 0 and the pod name and the namespace, that will waste a lot of your time. So in that case, some of these command parameters you can kind of combine it into an alias, and then you can have those aliases ready. You will be setting it up only one time, and then you will have the benefit during this entire duration of the exam. Additionally, make sure you run the kubectl version command and then check the kubectl version as well. By knowing this version, you will be able to select the correct documentation version. You can pick it up in the documentation on the right hand top corner. You can draw in the drop down, you can pick the correct version, and then all the materials that you will be getting will be for that particular specific version. During the exam, there are multiple clusters that you need to connect. That means you need to change the context and then connect into the correct cluster every time. Every question at the top, you can find out a kubectl config use context and the context name. So every time before starting the question itself, just copy that, paste it in console, and then connect into the correct context. Why you need to do that? Let's say in the exam, if it was asked to create a deployment, and then if you create it in a different context, different cluster, and then you will not get the points for it. To avoid this, make sure for every question, copy the context command, paste it into the console, execute it, then start reading the question. The next important tip is For every question there is an allocated weightage, and then that is showcased in the exam panel itself. At the top of the exam question you can see this particular question is, let's say, 5%, and then the next question, and then when you go there, and then you can find out, okay, that question will be 8%. As the exam is around 120 minutes, 2 hours, every 1% you can spend around 1 minute. So in that case, if you are looking at a question which is having a 5% weightage, right, try to complete that question during the first 5 minutes itself. If you are going ahead with the CKA exam, at the end of the exam, the last few questions will be a lot of cluster installations, troubleshooting, backups, and many things. So that might take some time. Because of that, try to save some time while you are taking the initial questions. Try to measure that time based on the weightage allocations for that question. So the next tip is, how do you approach the question? So first, read the question and then try to understand what it is asking. Some of the questions will be very straightforward. With a single kubectl command you will be able to get that task done, but there will be some questions where it has multiple tasks to do. So because of that, you need to split it into multiple subtasks and then perform the subtasks separately. At the end you will be completing the entire question collectively. Next tip is, at the end of every question you need to add one more task into that. That is to verify your answer. In the question it might ask, okay, you need to create a deployment in this particular namespace. You just type the kubectl command blah blah blah, and then you create the pod or deployment or whatever it is asked, and then you move it into the next question. But in that command, if there is something wrong, and then you create it in a different namespace, or else you put a different command, and then because of that, that pod might not be created, or else it might be in a crashback loop. So at the end of every task, every question, right, you need to add one more task to verify whether whatever you have created, whether that is in place in the Kubernetes cluster, or else if it is asked to create that definition and save it into a specific path, and then make sure that is there, and then add that one step verification process to each and every question. The next tip is always exit SSH. So during the exam, you may have to connect into multiple servers through SSH, multiple masters, worker nodes. So you will not be able to do the SSH as a chain. So you always SSH from your main server into the other server, and then exit from that, come back, and then exit into the next one. So before executing these SSH commands, try to remember what is your main server's name, whether that is node 01, and there will be a name into that server. And then once you execute SSH and then exit and then verify, okay, now whether I'm back into the correct server or not, right? Do that verification, and then when you're doing this SSH to avoid any unnecessary hassle. The next tip is, flag the questions where you are not comfortable with the given answer. Try to use that feature as much as possible, and then don't try to flag all the questions. So in that case you will not be able to find out what are the actual questions that you need to revisit or not. And also, along with the tagging, try to track your score. So if you flag the question and then remember what is the weightage of that particular question, that means if your answer given into that particular question is wrong, that means you will be losing this much of points in that exam. Have that kind of self-scoring for yourself while you are answering these questions. The next tip is, if you have already completed all of these questions, try to review all of these by going into each and every question one by one. You can start by going into the flag questions, and then you can verify it, and then you can go to the question number 1 and then come back one by one. So there you just do is, by looking at the question, you know, okay, this is the activity that I did. I can directly execute some get pods or whatever the things, and then check whether okay those pods are there, and then in that case I'll be a little bit comfortable that okay, I have completed that particular task. And sometimes you will find out that I completed that task, I'm 100% sure, but when I verified that pods and those resources are not there, because you might have already created in a different cluster because you haven't changed that cluster context correctly, or else you did it in a different namespace. You didn't pass the correct namespace parameter into your whatever the commands that you have executed. So you will end up in that kind of situations. If you are kind of going through this review process, you will come across with these kind of mistakes that you have done, and then you will be able to recover these points by simply doing this smaller test. And the other thing is, if you're creating some YAML files with the specification and then you edit it and then you apply it, when you're creating these YAML files, try to create it with the question number, or else try to follow some methodology. In the question, if it is not asking to save it into a specific place, you can have it in a one location, even in the home folder. Let's say if that particular resources are not there and then you have created YAML files, you know, okay, this definition is specifically in this particular file, and then I can simply apply that YAML file and then get those resources created without spending time again and again in the same question if you did some mistake somewhere during the process. The next tip and the last tip is, don't get panic and don't give up. During the exam, it will be so exhausting and you will find out that your head is on fire and whatever you are reading in the question, it will not go into your mind, and then the answers are not coming into your mind. You will come across this kind of stressful situation during this exam. Have a sip of water, take a deep breath, and then go to the question. Try to focus on the question and then try to find out the answer, execute it. If you are stuck in question, rather than panicking, just flag that question and move it into the next one and then come back later. Likewise, don't try to waste your time. Try to use the time in the most effective way. That's the most important thing. This exam is made for the people who have already using Kubernetes. That means if you are not a day-to-day Kubernetes user, and then if you didn't do practice for the preparation for this exam, it will be a little bit hard. Try to prepare yourself well and to end up in that kind of situations during the exam. Thank you so much for watching this entire video to understand what are the different tips and tricks that you can follow to get yourself certified in Certified Kubernetes Administrator and Certified Kubernetes Application Developer certifications. I wish you all the very best for your exam, and then I hope the tips and tricks mentioned in this video will be helpful to you. And then if you really like this video, please hit on the like button and the subscribe button and the bell sign to get notified when I upload a new video. Thank you so much. I wish you all the very best. See you again in a new video. Bye for now.